Well, thank you, everybody. It's first of all, let me say good morning.
Good morning.
It's almost the end of the week. We can do a little bit better than that. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. I got to tell you, it is actually a pleasure to be here speaking with you. I flew in yesterday from Rapid City, South Dakota. When I got out of the Holiday Inn Express and went to my car, there was 1.5 inches of snow. Heavy snow. And how many of you have ever driven in snow and you kind of drop the windows a little bit to kind of clear the snow off the window? Well, the down button got stuck on the driver's side. So that 1.5 inches of snow on the window ended up on my lap. That's how I started my day yesterday morning. I want to thank in particular Braden for inviting me to participate. I've been a participant and a presenter at his Cleveland HR Star Conference for several years in a row now, and fully value the contributions that HR Star brings to the Cleveland area, and I'm sure Atlanta also. I also want to thank Maureen for that nice introduction. You know, we actually had a little bit of an opportunity to speak ahead of time, and for a presenter, that's not always the case. A couple years ago, I was called on a Thursday night by a friend of mine in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I grew up, and he said, "Paul, I've got a tremendous opportunity for you to speak to one of our local business leadership groups down here." I said, "That's fantastic." I said, when is the presentation? He said, "Tomorrow." When you're asked to present tomorrow, what does that normally mean? The intended speaker canceled or had some. So I thought, well, you know what? I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. It's no big deal. I had brothers and sisters that lived there. I had friends that lived there. In fact, I'll have a little bit of fun with it. So I actually kind of put this little slide together, which was me. This is me right there at about the tender age of, I want to say, 6 or 7. And I thought I'd have some fun with it. Unfortunately, the person who introduced me had never taken the time to even meet me, nor read what I was going to be presenting about. So he got up after lunch and he went up to the podium and he kind of adjusted it. He said, "All right, everybody, it's time for our after lunch presentation. I'm not sure who our speaker is and I'm not really sure what he's going to talk about. So in case he's good, let's get on with it. In case he's not, let's get it over with." So I'd like to thank Maureen for sharing a little bit more love with me this morning. And on that note, let's get on with the program. What we're going to do today is a couple of things. We're going to certainly talk about employee engagement. My number one rule is to have a little bit of fun, as much as HR professionals are allowed to have fun. Now, my father told me years ago, he said, "You know, Paul, we're not here for a long time, we're here for a good time." How many of you think that's good advice to live by? Now, he told me that as I was heading out the door to my freshman year at The Ohio State University. So Mrs. Meshanko, my mother, did not think his timing was all very good. Because if any of you have ever been to Ohio State, it's really easy to have a fun time there, as I'm sure it is down here. So, but having fun is important because it engages a part of the brain called the limbic system, which directly affects how deeply we code information. So as much as we can, I'm going to try to have a little bit of fun this morning. What we are going to do from a tactical standpoint, and by the way, I'm told we have to wrap up by noon, right, Braden? Okay, no. We're going to talk about employee engagement, what it is, what it isn't, and we're going to also talk about, right up front, the business case. How many of you, let me see by show of hands, how many of your organizations have started at least, or have at least experimented with some type of employee engagement initiative? Anybody? Are any of your leaders at least asking about it? Or just by the term, are they running for the hills and saying, we really don't, it sounds too warm and fuzzy for us? So we're going to talk about what it is and the business case for it, because it does make a tremendous amount of sense. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to share with you some brand new research that my organization completed with the help of one of the top research institutions or research universities in North America about how you actually plot a course to get to this mystical place called employee engagement. And then what I'm going to do is, at the end is share with you some ideas that we know are essential if you actually want to be successful in this journey, because it can be a very tedious and non-productive journey if you don't go about it the right way. All right? So, and then if we aren't going to have, with a group this size, probably much of a formal wrap-up. I will be here the rest of the day, so if anybody wants to pull me aside during one of the breakouts, I am certainly not an expert. I'm a student of this thing called employee engagement, so I would love to hear your stories and experiences if you catch me throughout the day. All right? So, on with the show. Oh, one quick note. Those of you who are taking notes, Do not try to capture everything you see on my PowerPoint slides, because you're going to need like wrist supports when you're done. What I will do is make every single slide, with the exception of my child shot, available by download. I'm going to convert it to a PDF. My email address is pmeshanko@edgeohio.com, which is also in your program information. If you just send me a quick email message, I'll send you to our download site, and you can get everything that you want. Now, here's what I would ask that you write down if you are taking notes. Write down your particular ahas, those things that resonate with you, that you think you can actually go back and use with your own organization. We've heard the phrase before, knowledge is power. Is knowledge power all by itself? How many of you have a lot of knowledgeable people in your organizations that don't get a lot done? So it's really knowledge is only power when we do two things, when we apply it, but also when we share it. So capture your best ahas from this morning, and then make it a point to go back and share them with folks in your own organization, so this will be even more valuable for everybody. All right? Let's start with talking about why we want to focus on this thing called employee engagement in the first place. Well, the first reason is that work is still done by people. How many of you work for organizations where the bulk of the work is still done by people? And it's interesting, how many of you have read some of the work by Daniel Goleman, the fellow who did the work on emotional intelligence? His most recent book, it was a leadership theme. Anyways, what he said, he said human beings are an open loop system. An open loop system. What that means is that parts of our brain, and I'm a huge fan of brain science, by the way, parts of our brain are designed to do nothing more than cue in to the attitudes and intentions of other people around us. And what engagement ends up becoming, engagement is a function of that kind of that community attitude that we create to a degree. How many of you would agree that attitudes are contagious? So as long as work is done by people, and as long as people are kind of hardwired into each other, it makes a lot of sense to pay attention to that attitudinal backdrop. Number two, engagement is shown to considerably boost employee morale, and I would even go so far as saying that it promotes personal well-being and health too. How many of you have ever worked at a place that you just could not stand to be there? Or had a boss that you could just not stand to be around? By the way, I have a rule here. I would ask that if that person is here with you, that for the duration of our time, we refrain from the sidelong glances. You know who he's talking about, don't you? Boosts morale. So we do know that that's true. The other thing is it significantly lowers turnover costs. Now, my brother-in-law is an optometrist, and he told me when you reach the age of 41 or 42, you're going to need peeps. So I'm going to borrow my peeps for a second. According to the Families and Work Institute, employees who are engaged are 87% less likely to leave their organization. How many of you have employees in the organization who you wish would leave? But when people do leave, and they leave of their own accord, which ones are the ones that usually go? The good ones. How come? Because they can. Because they have the best resumes, the best people skills, and the best networks and everything else. So engagement significantly increases your capacity to keep those people. Another reason we want to focus on engagement is client satisfaction. There is an increasing body of evidence. We do a lot of work with healthcare, that there is a very, very tight correlation between increases and improvements in employee satisfaction or employee engagement and the experience that your customers or your patients have. So if that's important to your long-term success, that's another reason. And finally, higher productivity. I did not come from the HR or organizational development field originally. I've spent my years with, which is now part of Honeywell, but Allied Signal at that time, were spent in new product development and field sales before that. And at the end of the day, it's those functions it's all the other functions but outside of HR that stand to benefit the most from engaged employees. A couple of examples. Gallup just finished a study last August, and they said, according to their data, companies in the top 10% of engagement scores within their peer groups boasted 72% higher earnings per share. Towers Perrin, another global consulting firm, linked higher employee engagement to higher operating income, net income growth, and earnings per share growth. Okay? So if you work for somebody who's a show me the dollars kind of person, there is an increasing body of evidence to suggest that employee engagement does not only pay for itself, it actually becomes a profit initiative in and of itself. The problem is, what percentage of employees do you think today are currently engaged, thoroughly engaged in their work? What do you think? Well, here's, again, this is right off of some of the most recent data. According to Gallup today, 33%, roughly 1/3 of U.S. workers are engaged. 49% are on the fence. They just show up. They're not hurting you. They're doing their job and they're leaving. Thanks, have a nice day, okay? And then you have the remaining 18% who are actively disengaged, which means they are actively undermining the contributions of the engaged group, okay? The cost of this active disengagement and this neutrality, it's called EE neutrality, people who are sitting on the fence, according to the Gallup folks again, probably costs the U.S. business economy about $350 billion worth of productivity in any given year. How would you like to have your share of that back? Let's talk about what it's going to take to get there.